to another conversation on Awaz-e-Haqiqat that translates to the voice of truth. I'm your host, Chris Malika Bhadra, and depending on whichever part of the world you're listening to me from, I'm going to talk about something that's when I first spoke with my guest, the kind of work she's done, and she's got a PhD in a similar area. It's about culture, it's about our roots, it's about learning and unlearning our culture. And she is doing a stellar job in kind of helping us raise more awareness, in kind of helping us learn the good stuff, unlearn things that we should have unlearned, and in kind of debunking the myths that often surround the South Asian diaspora. On that note, I'm so excited that tonight or today again, I'm going to be talking to Marina. Marina is a cultural researcher with a PhD in culture and society, exploring migration, identity, and belonging. On her YouTube channel, she creates short and long form videos that unpack the everyday complexity of being brown in a Western world. Right from arranged marriage stereotypes to aesthetic anxiety, from diaspora dilemmas to the politics of smell, she uses storytelling, academic insights, and a bit of dry humor to question stereotypes and educate audiences on the impacts of colonization and South Asian experiences. Her goal is simple: to make our cultural experiences more viable, more nuanced, and more human. Wow. Such profound words. And on that note, without delay, very good evening, Marina. Thank you so much for giving me your time. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me, Chris. I'm doing well. I've got a little bit of a viral cough, so I might be coughing through this, but I think I should be fine. Yeah,
Mm.
thanks.
Virtual same pinch on
Yeah,
the cuff, Maria.
yeah.
First, before starting the conversation, Marina, what you're doing is absolutely amazing. Like a lot of us,
Well,
we
thank
do
you.
do our PhDs, but kind of that story ends there on paper. But what you're trying to do, blend it with real world and something that stands with us every day. Kudos to you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Apologies to our listeners. We both will be, I think, coughing intermittently. So please forgive our coughing and focus on the conversation. Marina, first things first. As part of your study, how has migration evolved or changed in Australia over the past decade?
That's a good question. So, look, I guess I'll just start from the start a little bit. So, Australia has traditionally been a what we understood as a settler country. So you
Yeah.
would basically move here, and the kind of initial sort of aim of Australia, or like when the migrants kind of like the migration program at the early stages, was very much about settlement and citizenship. But over the last decade, in fact, even more, I would say sort of from the mid 2000s, there's definitely been a migration program, but the focus has shifted and it's kind of gone more on skilled skilled immigration, which also focuses a lot on long-term temporary migration. So we're seeing a sort of like a shift in this sort of settler immigration, like sort of basic basis of Australia
Mm.
has shifted to a more long-term,
Mm.
temporary, points-based, skilled. You kind of
Yep.
have to prove your skills, and you kind of have to kind of become a desirable migrant for all states and purposes in this country. And so that's kind of been the major shift. And because of that, what we're seeing is lots and lots of people are spending lots and lots of time figuring out their pathways.
Mm-hmm.
There's not many pathways available. You end up spending a lot of time on temporary visas or on bridging visas, figuring out all the different sort of complex immigration pathways available right now. We've got state sponsored and
Mm.
region sponsored and employer sponsored. You've got your sort of independent skilled immigration. So there's just like a proliferation of all these
Yeah.
pathways, and they're not necessarily easy to navigate. And so there's a proliferation of a migration industry that has expanded over the last, again, over a decade. You see all these kinds of immigration agents that are sort of popping up, all these
Yeah.
education agents that have popped up, and there's a kind of like a big now business around migration as well. So it's becoming more and more entrenched. It's becoming more and more sort of staggered and long term, and in trying to sort of settle here. And at the same time, you're seeing this kind of big proliferation of the industry as well. So you're seeing lots and lots of earlier in the sort of like in the early sort of 2010s, you saw a lot of like news about like these visa factory
Yeah.
colleges, and
Mm.
things like that. So kind of that's kind of like scaling back a little bit because they've made migration quite strict through that now. But again, it's like basically just I think it's characterized right now by long-term temporary migration. And then the conversation about migration is changing as well. Like a lot of the debates about migration right now are
Hmm.
about what it means for people to be in these kinds of states of limbo at the moment,
Right.
like when
Hmm.
they're trying to migrate to Australia. Like you have to navigate this in between space for a
Hmm.
very long time. What
Yeah,
does that mean? What kind of impacts does that have on people? Yeah.
that's very nice. That was a very well explained scenario, the real-time situation we are living in. But I want to kind of take a slight discourse based on
Yeah.
what you've provided here and talk about the mindset, migration mindset, right? So you and I, we are both from the South Asian diaspora, and there's a huge boom in South Asian migration.
Yes.
How does that mindset, like if I'm coming from India, Pakistan, anywhere in the continent, I'm in a Western world. Am I ready to unlearn things that I've learned for, say, 30 years of my life and blend into the modern culture that has accepted me or that has given me work and a life to lead? What are your thoughts on that, Karina?
I think it's different for, I mean, at some extent, it's different for different people. And like we're at a point in the, particularly in urban Australia, and I'm talking more about like urban centers like
Yeah.
Sydney, Melbourne,
Mm.
Brisbane, maybe Perth,
Yeah.
to some extent, where you have a lot more, I guess, cultural diversity and multiculturalism that allows people to kind of express themselves, and there's a lot more, I guess, um, understanding of
Mm.
people from different parts of the world than compared to like not the major sort of centers.
Yeah.
And that's what probably where, so I mean I don't know, but like academic literature sort of talks about the kind of experiences that people have when they have regional migration programs that don't necessarily have the same kind of understandings, or the
Mm.
job market isn't the same, and there's a lot more sort of
Yeah.
different types of struggles that you might have. And so there's that, and I think that that is generally, if you're migrating to a bigger sort of center, you have a lot more cultural diversity, and I think
Mhm.
it's easier to kind of find your place. And at least that was the case for me. I first came here as an international student to Melbourne. I found it extremely multicultural,
Mm.
and there was a big sort of space, and there was a big sort of intake of international students at the time. It's continuing. So it's kind of like it seems to be working well.
Mm.
However, I don't think that the kind of like the culture shock still exists, and there are still, I guess, experiences that people might have that might be sort of not necessarily overt, but quite subtle
Yeah.
in terms of racism, or in terms of prejudice, or in terms of
Mm.
biases. It could still happen. And I think often, like, maybe I think I had to come to terms of it in a very interesting, like, as in, like, I didn't quite realize earlier on that,
Mm.
when people said to me, wow, your English is so good, and I have a YouTube video about it, by the way. It's like initially I was like, oh, okay, they're complimenting me, this sounds great, like, I think I'm fine, like, I'm yay.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
then now I'm like, wait a second, the assumption here is that my English shouldn't be good,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
therefore if it is, you're like, so that compliment sort of like, it feels like, a bit of a test, or like people
Mm.
asking you where you're from all the time, even after you tell them, oh, I'm from Australia, and they're, no, 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 but where are you really from? That
Yeah.
kind of question. So those kinds of subtle sort of like, almost, now I kind of think of them as microaggressions sometimes, but they exist, and they kind of tend to exist in the
Yeah.
workplace, or even in your university or college as well. And I think that that's something that we need to work on, even in these major
Absolutely.
centers. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember this was my first lunch. I was just 2 months into my PhD and I was sitting with all my colleagues and someone says, how much did you score in your IELTS? That time I was too naive to understand where the question was coming from. And later I realized, well, he didn't have to ask me that question. It's
Yeah.
pretty evident because I can speak and I've given an English examination. So I totally agree where you're coming from, Marina. But the next part is if you're flipping the table around, is when somebody has migrated, they're trying to settle in, what are some of the challenges a person of color might face in a Western scenario or a Western world?
I think the challenges can, again, I would say it's different for different people. And like part of my PhD was understanding how people navigate skilled immigration, right? And I didn't kind of base my PhD on particular groups of people. So I didn't say that I'm only looking at South Asians. I'm
Yeah.
looking at all kinds of people who are on a skilled pathway. And what I found was very interesting because for somebody who is migrating from the global north, for example, their struggles are quite different to the struggles of somebody who's migrating from the global south, like from South
Mm.
Asia, or, you know,
Right.
firstly, I think just like basic things, like you mentioned IELTS, you don't have to do IELTS if you're from what is understood as a native English speaking country.
Mm.
So they
Yeah.
don't like, so even just the pathway of the migration, right? Even as you're going through that system, you're treated differently based on where your
Mm.
passport is from. Even
Mm.
though your English might not be that good compared to somebody who's grown up in South Asia and studied English all their
Yeah.
life, you know? So those kinds of, like, I guess biases are sort of embedded within the system. You're like, by default, just by your passport, you're experiencing that, and that sort of struggle is, and the IELTS struggle is real. Like, I think that's one of the biggest,
Mm.
um, if I'm allowed to say, the biggest sort of problematic things in my experience. Like, people
Mm.
have to do it multiple times
Yes.
to get the score that you need, or
Yeah.
even the PTE system. Like,
Mm.
I've heard stories where people have sat for it 18,
I,
19
yeah.
times to
Mm.
try and get the desired score, because it's extremely difficult to be, and there's no sort of like be able to kind of verify that or double check that. You always have to pay exorbitant fees to try and even
Yes.
check that,
Mm.
or even do it in the first place. So it's just a huge, like, the cost imposed on people who are coming from the global south. So that experience plus the cost impost is also
Mm.
really high compared to people coming from the global north. And I think that, like, in terms of other things, that the things that I mentioned, right, like when you come here, it is a bit of a culture shock. It is
Yeah.
a different society, it is a different kind of place, and I think that a very sort of, like, that kind of orientation to what it is, that what Australia is, or what this
Mm.
city is, or what your context is often missing from the immigration programs and even international student programs. Like,
Mm.
I remember this thing where I, for the longest time, did not fully understand or know or learn, because I wasn't given the opportunity, about indigenous culture, which is such a
Mm.
central aspect of Australian
Right.
culture, like such an important critical aspect of Australian culture, right? And
Mm.
so for the longest time, because universities are not really necessarily properly focusing on that, the
Mm.
immigration program isn't really focusing on that. So I think that those kinds of struggles are really, like, sometimes you just don't know what the culture
Right.
kind of is about, and you kind of have to almost, it's, the onus is on you to kind
Mm.
of learn it. And I think that, you have to kind of, even language, even like accent, even slang. Like, I remember people used to initially say ta, like, and I would be like, oh, they mean bye, like, okay, ta-da. But no, it's thanks. And you're
Yeah.
like, well, no one really tells you all this. Like,
Yes.
no one really kind of helps you. So there's, like, it ranges from like the big complex issues like language tests and
Mm. Mm.
navigating the immigration system to these really small, minute things that you don't
Right.
necessarily notice, but ultimately you're like, well, yeah, I don't, yeah. So there's lots of little sort of things along the
Things
way that,
going on. Yeah. True.
yeah.
True, true, true. I remember earlier, maybe I was sillier. I used to ask on a Monday morning to my colleagues, "How are you doing?" So back in India, we used to, "Yeah, I'm doing well." Or I'm here. This is the first time I heard that. Oh, not too bad. And for a few times, I was like, "What does that mean?" And then it took
Yeah.
me a while to say, "It's just another way of asking, yeah, I'm doing well or
Little
whatever."
bad. I mean, so little bad or little good, or like, what do you mean? Yeah, yeah. I know there's
It's
just
just,
those subtleties in the language as
mm,
well that you
mm,
can't, like,
absolutely.
and you're an out, so you do feel like an outsider because you don't kind of understand the well,
Mm.
English is one thing, but Australian is another thing, I think.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
you don't understand those
The
subtleties.
common lingo, you mean
Yeah,
the
yeah,
hi in the email you say cheers or hi in back in India I used to start an email with dear. Those things. So
yeah,
it takes a while. Takes a while.
yeah.
But the next thing, Marina, I want to ask from your work is you worked on identity and belonging, right? Now, if you were to explain these terms to someone who doesn't have a very profound understanding of the words, how would you explain these terms in very layman terminology?
All right, let me try. So identity, I would say, is who you are,
Mm.
how I see myself. And
Yeah.
that means that not just my ethnicity or my background or my culture, but also my experiences, my, things I like, my interests, and what I like to do, how I like to have fun, so I think it's like, I think that is, to me, that seems like identity. It's not just about all the kind of you know, basic markers of like where you're from, your background, but it's also,
Mm.
I think, about interests, experiences, what makes you you, right? Like I think it's both of those things. And then belonging is where you feel, how a place, or I guess where you feel at home for me.
Right.
Like, so where you feel that you belong. And just to give you, I guess, an example from my own experience about belonging, I think that my sense of belonging is really tied to Melbourne. I came to Australia as an international student to Melbourne, and then got some work, moved to the Gold Coast, and then moved to Sydney, and lived in Sydney for 10 years, and didn't feel the sense of belonging that I
Right.
somehow feel in Melbourne. So I'm back
Mm.
here after my PhD, and immediately I feel like I belong here. I think I have
Yeah.
my community. So this sense of like what the city makes me feel like and what the community around me makes me feel like, I just feel like I belong here.
Mm.
I
Mm.
hope that I hope
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah. But
example sort of
I
clarifies.
have a follow-up question if that's okay,
Yeah.
Marina. Actually, I'm just thinking which one to ask first. Often I've heard migrants saying that I still don't know what is home for me.
Mm,
To the land where I've resettled or to the land from where I come from.
mm.
So, do you often see people talking about this dilemma in their lives? And the second question that I have for you, have you ever seen where these two intersect, where identity intersects with belonging? Have you ever come across a situation in your study or the people you've spoken to?
Yeah, so the first one is being in two places kind of
Mm,
thing, right? So
mm,
I think as immigrants, I mean, look, I have come to a point where in my life where where I'm I embrace my, I guess, dual identity. And
yeah.
it's very true, and it can be a dilemma that in Pakistan, so I'm originally from Pakistan, I don't feel Pakistani enough. And in
Mm,
Australia, I don't feel Australian enough. And I think
mm,
that you hear people say that all the
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And I think that like one of the ways to deal with that, like initially it was like, but where do I belong? I think one of the ways for me is to like embrace this kind of middle space. Yes,
Right.
I'm dual sort of, I guess, I have a dual hybrid, or what Homi Bhabha has explained as hybridity.
Mm,
I have a hybrid identity. And
yeah.
then when you kind of come to terms with that, like, yeah, and I think there's a lot of richness and there's a beauty to that, like
Mm,
to your hybrid identity. I think it's a as long as you can um think of it that way, I think it is a valuable place to be, like as long
mm,
and not, I guess, there are a lot of struggles and like a lot of things that you need to perhaps experience in order to get there, but like I feel
yeah.
like there is this kind of beauty of hybridity as well that we should talk about. And then the second question is about intersection between identity and belonging. I think that these two concepts are completely intertwined.
Mm,
Why somebody feels that they belong somewhere is because that place allows them to embrace their identity the way that
right.
they are, right?
Mm,
So
mm,
why do I feel like I belong in Melbourne is because I feel like I can be my most authentic, true self in Melbourne. The city sort of is the kind of vibe that,
right.
for lack of a better word, is the vibe that I need, right? So I think
Yes.
that here is sort of my identity matches with the vibe of this place, and so I
Mm,
feel that I belong. I
mm.
hope that is clear.
Oh, absolutely. But Marina, you've done a study on this issue, right? If there's a migrant who's been here for X number of years, they still can't feel that whatever you mentioned as
Yeah,
belonging, right? They
yeah.
can't feel that attachment. How can we raise more awareness around this issue to migrants around us?
And I think that that's a very good question, Chris. And I think it's useful to, I guess, inquire why that is the case, right? Like,
Mm,
is it, I mean, look, there's one aspect of this is that we can talk about immigration policy and
mm,
what the government is doing in terms of this, like,
yeah,
helping people settle, helping them not just integrate but really feel like this is their home.
right.
And perhaps that messaging needs to improve, because maybe there's something there that's, and not maybe, actually, certainly there is something there that's not working
Mm,
right,
mm,
right? And then I think it's also about like people finding their community and their tribe, and that aspect of it, or you kind of feeling comfortable to be able to get there, takes time. It takes
Mm.
time to build. Like, particularly now, like, we're not, I don't know about you, Chris, but like, I kind of differentiate between the diaspora immigrant and the first gen international
Yeah.
student or PR immigrant like myself,
Mm.
right? Like, those are two different experiences altogether. If you're
Mm.
in a diaspora, you kind of have a well-knit community because
Mm.
of the
Yes.
because of that community, right?
Yes. Yeah.
When you come here as an international student, as a first gen, I think it's a lot of work to try and find
Absolutely.
and build
Yeah.
it over time. And it takes time. I've been
Mm.
here for 14 years almost. And it's taken that long for
Mm.
me to feel like, oh, you know what? This is the home now. Like Melbourne is the place to, like, it wasn't like that for a very
True.
long time because think about it. Like, you're just your first gen. You don't
Mm.
really have anybody here. You may have some relatives who are completely in a separate sort of space within their
Mm.
diaspora community. And those two, and often like in books or in movies or in pop culture, we see those immigrant experiences sort of merge together. And I
Mm.
always kind of say, no, 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 they're two different two different immigrant experiences.
Absolutely. Mm.
Yeah,
Very interesting point, Maria, because when I came, similar story. I came by myself, no friends or family. When I started networking, I saw these diaspora families. I want to ask you about the conversations, right? So there are two circles that we have established. One, people like you and myself, people who come on their own. And once families who've migrated here, they have the whole setup done.
yeah.
How is the conversation dynamic in these two circles? What kind of conversations take place in both of these scenarios?
So conversations regarding like,
Anything or generic conversation.
yeah, like again, like I think that like firstly, I think there's again studies done on this as well
Mm,
and this needs to be, I guess, checked. I haven't kind of engaged with
mm,
this literature recently, but there is this sense in the diaspora community of like the more sort of foundational immigrants, right? Like there, and also this kind of nation, this kind of attachment to nation,
right.
to their countries, it is completely different to
Mm,
the kind of attachment we might have to our
yeah.
like I feel like a lot of these diaspora immigrants, or they may have migrated like back in the day, early
Yeah.
sort of migration
Mm,
programs,
mm,
and sometimes, and this is going to sound funny, but like sometimes when I've interacted with them in
mm.
my conversations, it seems like they're kind of stuck in a different
Exactly.
time of like when like the 1970s Pakistan
True.
conversation sort of comes up, and I'm like, well, they I just feel like they don't recognize that countries moved on,
Mm,
and they look at you like, but like, how are you like this? Like,
mm,
Pakistanis did this, and I'm like, well, no, Pakistan, like you. So sometimes they're kind of really stuck in that time, and I think that they impose that culture a lot on their second generation sort of kids,
mm.
and you hear these stories from, and again, like media, pop culture, even academic sort of work on this area, is that that's where the confusion really sort of begins between these
Yeah.
sort of second gen immigrant
Mm,
kids. Whereas for us, I think we come at a time where we're kind of in this other zone of like, oh, I want to have an adventure and I want to explore and I want to study. And you're
mm,
kind of like in that zone. That experience is completely different to this kind
mm.
of
Yeah.
confused experience. We're not thinking about these things. We're thinking about, I'm going to go as a student and I'm going to like, figure out this new, and I'm going to be a global citizen. And like, it's a completely different sort of
Yeah.
narrative in your mind. Also, you don't have the same kind of pressures of the community. Often,
Mm,
like people who come by themselves, there's stories about like you kind of are almost detaching yourself from the community and you're coming here. So you don't kind of want to, it's
associate
like
that.
it's
Mm,
your solo adventure, right? It's not,
yeah.
you're not your these people on the other hand might have a lot of like pressures about, because they're part of a community, they have the same sort of social cultural pressures that
Right.
we might have back home in our community, about marriage and about the right
Mm.
career path and about like making money and all of that stuff, so I think that comes later for us once we've
Yes, it
studied and
does. But
yeah.
because now I can see what you're saying, because in that diaspora community, the conversations are very materialistic. How many properties are you thinking of
Yeah,
buying? What car are you driving? How many bedrooms do you have? Versus while I was in the PhD stage, our cohort of friends had a whole separate conversation. Are you getting any extra work? What's your
yeah.
thesis on? How are you trying? So it's a whole separate world out there, and I don't think they necessarily collide. So you're absolutely right in saying that there were two different worlds in a bigger world. But
Yeah, there's also a lot of like co-ethnic like sort of what do I call it, like discrimination as well. Like
Mm.
there are again studies about, like, older gen, like diaspora community immigrants not wanting new people from their community coming
Yeah.
in, not
Mm.
really being supportive, or giving them jobs that are really low paid and, like, very exploitative.
Yeah.
So there is like a lot of like that co-ethnic, and like that is a really, I think, interesting area to explore about
Mm.
how these two worlds collide. Like I think
Exactly.
it's something definitely interesting to explore in migration studies, or
Agreed.
even cultural studies. I think it'll be, yeah.
Because I saw this post during COVID times, a few migrant students, I think they were girls, they were looking for jobs and they got mistreated by a local person. He
Mm.
started asking for favors, unwanted favors. That made me think that we are here, we're supposed to help each other, but are we actually helping each other? Especially people like students and girls who are out here themselves. I don't
Yeah.
know, I don't have the answer yet. But Marina, moving on to the work you're doing as a storyteller. So you do these stories, you put up video. Excuse me. Um, does the art of storytelling, in your opinion, Marina, help in raising awareness against certain social stereotypes? And if so, how?
Yes, I think so. I think storytelling is a powerful, powerful tool. And I'm all about it, right? Like I'm a researcher. I work as a researcher as well, post PhD.
Mm.
And a lot of what we deal with is like data and numbers, and often think that what statistics tell you is one thing. It tells you the what, but it doesn't get to the depth of the human experience behind those numbers. Like, storytelling, I think, becomes really powerful when it humanizes those numbers, right? And when you talk about stereotypes, like if I make a video about why it's wrong when you say why my English is so good,
Mm.
like it's a funny take on it. Like really, if you watch my video, it's a funny take on, like, well, first I thought it was a compliment, and then I thought about it a little bit more. I try to do it in a bit of a comedic style,
Mm.
only to, I guess, just tell people that, okay, when you do this, what does it make a person like me feel? What are you
Mm.
thinking you're making me feel like? And I
Yeah.
think that that's sort of like, with a little bit of humor and a little bit of a story arc, it sort of humanizes that experience. And often the
Mm.
comments that I get on my YouTube videos are very much like, oh, that's like good food for thought, or that's like, that made me think, or like, I never thought about it this way. And I think that just becomes a bit of a, it's not like this is the way to go. It almost is like a conversation starter. So I
Right.
treat the video like that. Okay, this is the opening, this is the experience, this is what people statistically say, here's some human experiences behind that, and here, let's talk. And then I'll open up that discussion, and I'll be like, comment and tell me about what you think of this. Have you experienced it? And so I think it becomes a bit of a conversation starter, and that's kind of
Right.
the aim. Yeah.
Right. But Marina, from what I see these days, especially conversation starters can often go either way, right? Because you're leaving the platform and the space open. Does that ever happen to you that you're expecting something, but a very crude or negative comment comes your way?
Oh, yeah, all the time, all the time. I did a video, and I think this was my only, what I would call like a viral video, that and the topic of the video was like, why is the West afraid of bright colors? And I genuinely think that that Western, and where it sort of started from. I have a small business called Milk, where I sell Sindhi folk, like really colorful
Right. Hmm.
Sindhi folk art jackets and vests. And I was in a market, and like people would come and people would want to wear it or try
Hmm.
it because it's so bright and colorful. But then they'd immediately be like, "But this is so colorful, it's not for me." And then I kind of like did a bit of a social experiment, looking at all the people who were sort of in the market.
Hmm.
Everyone was like black, gray, beige. And then I
Hmm.
looked at my own wardrobe, and I'm like, yes, I'm also increasingly becoming black, gray, beige. I used to be a more colorful person. What happened? And so I thought that was like a good thing to sort of talk about in a video. Like,
Yeah.
why is it that we stopped using color in the West? And
Hmm.
then looking at some academic work behind it as well. And it turns out that, there's just a uniformity sort of exercise that happens. And ultimately, like, you lose color. There's a lot of like, I guess, story behind it, or like
Right.
academic work behind it. But on that video, so many people were like, you are completely, absolutely wrong. This is not the case. And we do like color, and look at our old like art, and look at the Renaissance. And like, I'm like, yeah, 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 I know. I'm just talking about this kind of modern experience of vibe.
Yeah.
There's lots and lots of that. And you're absolutely right. It opens up. I think I don't necessarily mind unless it's rude and
Mm,
absolutely, I guess, just, not nice.
mm,
I don't mind questions or even criticisms
mm.
or challenges of to what I'm saying, as long as it's done in a polite and respectful way.
Right.
I
Right.
still think that's important. Difference of opinion is all right. I'm happy with that. As long as we
Absolutely.
can, I guess, talk, because
Mm,
that's what diversity, like, we can have different opinions, we can have different experiences. Let's talk about it. As long as it's a conversation and not
mm.
like a you're stupid, you don't know anything, what are you talking about?
Yes.
Like,
Agreed.
as long as it's not rude, then I don't mind it. But there's rude comments as well, so you can that happens, you
Mm.
ignore them. That's what you do.
On that topic, Marina, on the basis of ignoring what is not pleasant and still making your way, and you've decided that you will keep on doing things, which is amazing, right? On a difficult day, Marina, when things go hard or not as you plan them to be, how do you take care of your mental health?
I must be honest, Chris, I am getting better at this. Sorry, I have to cough. um definitely am trying to get wow. It's one of those ones where it's sort of like now attacks you. 1 second. Right. So yeah, it's something that I think I'm getting better at. Like I naturally which is, I don't like this about myself. I'm a bit of an overworker and an overthinker and a over workaholic person, and I don't know whether it's like a genetic thing, because maybe it is culturally
Yeah.
coded in us somehow. So really trying to like unlearn that behavior at the moment, and really drawing really hard boundaries about how much I'm supposed to work and how much screen time I'm supposed to have, putting
Mm.
my phone on like the other in another room, like when I um wake up, so that
Yeah.
I don't have to use it immediately after I or check my emails or check Slack or whatever
Yeah.
immediately. So like these kinds of like little actions. But I think having, for me personally, having a community around has been really,
Mm.
really helpful. Having friends that I can call and just be like, can we just chat? I'd like to meet up. Shall we just meet up for a coffee or something? And usually they're available. And that's just, I'm lucky to have that. And I think that's been super helpful for
Mm.
me. And then, just having moved to Melbourne, where I genuinely feel more at home,
Yeah.
am just feeling better. But I
Mm.
think I still have a bit of a way to go in making my in unlearning some of my, I guess, behaviors that
True.
that would give me better peace.
I'm sure you'll get there very soon, but because I asked this question to everyone, more so because I had my own journey of mental health a few years ago. That was a time when I realized there's such a huge gap between what people back home think mental health to be. It's such a heavy and undiscussed topic, whereas
Absolutely.
here you have so much of help, awareness, resources, you name it. There's a huge gap. So that is why I think it's imperative and very, very important that we keep having this conversation to
Oh,
probably
100%. Look,
raise
I
genetic
totally
awareness.
agree. And I think back home, it's, even though it's gotten better, I think with time, it's still not there. Like
No,
it's still
no,
not, it's
yeah,
still quite taboo. And also like, I see this sort of, there's a gendered aspect to it as well. Like me talking about my mental health is somewhat okay, but my husband talking about his mental health
oh
is
yeah,
absolutely like, and he's
yes,
just like always got a bit of a stiff, like, oh, I'm fine,
yes,
like this, which is really not nice, because every it's men can have lots of issues, like it
absolutely,
shouldn't be gender focused, and it
absolutely.
shouldn't have to have this. But I think that that's, again, and I think we're culturally conditioned to feel certain things.
Mm,
I have to stop myself when I'm trying to, I guess, prove myself at work and be like, no, 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 I can do this, and I can do this at deadline. And I have to really stop myself and be like, what's this what's it doing mentally to me? What impact is it going to have?
yes,
And I have to stop my kind of cultural conditioning of being like the A grade student all the time, right? Like you have to kind of consciously remind yourself that take a break, go and, read a book, take a walk. This is not important. This is not like,
yes,
you don't need to
yes.
do this today. Yeah.
There are so many things, Marina. I think we need a whole separate
Yes,
conversation on what we
absolutely.
are taught to implement, whereas what we can do to raise boundaries. One last question before we wrap this particular conversation, Marina, is basically two questions in one. One is, what would be your message to our listeners, and where can people find you on social media?
Okay, so the first one, where what my message is, I think what I say on YouTube as well, stay curious. I think that suspend judgment, stay
Mm,
curious, learn about other people, learn about other experiences,
yeah.
have empathy. And I think
Mm,
empathy automatically comes when you have an open mind and you're ready to sort of
yes.
listen to somebody else's experience, and when you're curious, you
Mm,
automatically, I think, become empathetic.
yes.
And so I think that's kind of my broad message.
Sure.
And then my social media, well, so I have mainly on YouTube at the moment, so it's Shara Masala, that's what it's
Mm.
called. Or you can find me via Dr. Marina Khan. But my channel is called Shara Masala. And then Instagram, I can share my details with you, or should I just
Yeah,
share it
yeah.
here? What do you, yeah,
Sure.
what?
Anything which is comfortable.
Yeah, but
Oh,
YouTube is the main one. Please join in. Please participate. Please, it's a good community. We chat, like there's lots of comments and chat that we have online. So yeah, would be great.
amazing. Thanks, Marina. Thanks for your time. And to our listeners who heard us for the first time, so I was talking to Dr. Marina, who has done amazing work on cultural studies, migration, the effects that have migration has when we move to a separate country, and her YouTube channel, as she mentioned. Please join in. I'll be posting the link as well. And those who have heard us for a while, I hope that you like the conversation that you heard today. If you've got any thoughts or feedback, please write to me at awazehaqiqat@gmail.com, or you can also reach out to me on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, because what we discussed about today is profound and it needs to be discussed at a regular basis, not just a one off conversation. On that note, Marina, thank you so much for giving me your time. I hope we can again come back for some more meaningful conversations and more topics that are still tucked away in a Pandora's box. So thank you for giving me your time.
Thank you for having me. This was so great. Yeah,
Pleasure.
no, thanks.
Thank
And
you.
thanks for doing this as well. Kudos to you too, Chris. This is great.
Thank you to you too. Likewise.